Appearance on Dion's Daily Dose does not imply endorsement from or by any candidate or guest. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by Dion Bergeron or Dion's Daily Dose are his own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of any guest. Material and information presented is for general information purposes only. The Dion's Daily Dose name in all forms and abbreviations are the property of its owners, and its use does not imply endorsement of or opposition to any specific organization, product, or service. If you'd like to support the show, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/Dion's Daily Dose.
Hey, welcome everybody. Dion's Daily Dose for Sunday, September 27th, and of course 2020, because this year never ends. Welcome. We got a very special show tonight for you. We are actually talking to multiple members of Indiana NORML. That's NORML, and that is, I'm going to let you tell them what it stands for. It's not that long. It's National Organization for the Reformation of Marijuana Laws, and I'm going to pull them in real quick. We'll be introducing them, and we'll start, I don't know, left to right, right to left, up to down. Doesn't really matter. Whoever wants to go for it first. I'll play their little thing, drop my little comment, and whoever wants to go first.
Hi, I'm Neil Smith. I'm Chairman Emeritus of Indiana NORML and currently Political Director.
My name is Jack Kane. I'm on the Board of Directors. I'm the Secretary of Indiana NORML. I've been working at it for 15 years. Thank you.
And I am Erin Sink. I am the Membership Director for Indiana NORML.
All right, awesome. Thank you. Obviously, if you're tuning in to my program, you know who I am. Not going to waste a lot of time on that. My hope today is to give people who normally don't know a lot about the legalization effort going on for especially medical cannabis. More than likely, that's your biggest concern. I know it's mine. For especially our veterans who are dealing with chronic pain, PTSD, a lot of these things that the pharmaceutical companies have a stranglehold on. And there's a reason for that. I've talked before about my issues with big pharmaceutical companies. If you want another option for people out there besides Eli Lilly and Bayer and all these other big companies, these are the people to talk to, because these are the people that are fighting every single day, writing letters, pushing forward legislation, talking to the people that actually make the decisions in order to get medical cannabis legalized here in Indiana and federally. It's something that I care a lot about. I think it's something that a lot of people care about. Looks like Sharon's having some connection issues here. There, she dropped and then came back. That's okay. I'm gonna turn it over to. We'll start with Jack, since we have a new kind of position here, and then we'll kind of go around. Tell us a little about how Indiana NORML is fighting the fight for the people who don't know what you guys are about.
Well, first of all, thanks very much, Dion, for letting us come on and talk about it. Cannabis legalization is obviously one of our favorite topics, so we appreciate the opportunity. Thank you. And we appreciate your position in terms of supporting medical cannabis. It's very rare to see a conservative on that side to say, yeah, we want to legalize it, recognize the benefits of that. Indiana NORML will give you some background. We're the Indiana state chapter of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, which started in 1970 and keeps down in Washington in direct opposition to Richard Nixon and starting of the war on drugs, particularly the war on marijuana. And we've got chapters in all 50 states, and we're working very hard to get the laws changed and realize that marijuana and cannabis are not the demon drug that everybody thinks, and that there's a whole wide variety of applications and uses for this plant. And so we're just trying to work with people on the local level. Sharon will be able to talk a lot about that. She's doing a lot of great work there in Howard County. And we work with legislators trying to get people active and get them out to contact their legislators and let them know that they want to change the law.
That's awesome. And I'm going to tell you, as someone who has just been a kind of mildly concerned outsider and moved to a very concerned outsider to someone who's cares enough to put my name on the ballot and run for things because it matters. That process, I've learned a lot about people who have, like you, who have been in, I call it the game, the political game, for a long time, because it really is. It's a game, but that's a whole other subject. But people that have put themselves out there and are actually seeking to change things rather than sitting on their couch complaining on Facebook. And that's important because it's important for people to know that there are organizations out there that are working towards what they care about, like NORML. If you don't mind sharing, what's your experiences with people, legislators? You said you'd be the one to talk to with trying to actually enact change.
The general public, when you speak to them, they are, like 78% of users want legalization. That's the reality of things. And when you talk to the general population, everybody says, yeah, it should be legalized. It should have never been illegal and all of that. Now, my experience is I have talked to my legislators in my area, and I've talked to really everyone in my city, the city council, the commissioner, the prosecutor, and a lot of them are actually somewhat on our side, except for our prosecutor. The problem with it is getting them to publicly say that they are for it. That's the thing, because they're afraid that it's going to backfire on them if they publicly say that they're for it. What we encourage people to do is to contact their legislators, because the more constituents that contact their legislators and say, hey, we want legalization, we need this, like we need cannabis as our medicine, whatever the case may be. That's what people need to be doing, is contacting their legislators and getting active in their community. And some people can't do that because, they're medically not able to. Some people are stuck at home because that's the only option they have. But you can still, in fact, this year you can vote from home. So you can vote, pro-cannabis. That's a big step. Make sure you're voting for pro-cannabis candidates. Also, you can still contact your legislators, your representatives, your anybody. You can contact them from your computer at home. So even if you don't want to get out of your home, or you can't get out of your home, or you want to be on the sidelines and you don't want to be so public, you can still support the cause, even from sitting at home on your computer. So we encourage people to do that. And those that get out with us, in the line of fire, we appreciate those people too, So
well, I think that's a fantastic point. It's something that not a lot of people think about, because personally, as a conservative, and I've talked to a lot of conservative voters, you're absolutely spot on that the vast majority of people that I've talked to either are openly, yes, legalize it across the board, or at minimum are, yes, I want it medically legalized, or at the very least, there's a very, very tiny minority that's like, no, I'm against it, it's the devil. Mm-hmm. But the majority of people are for it. So where do you think that the fear from legislators comes from? Do you think it's, I guess I should rephrase. Do you think that it's a fear to legalize it for political pushback, or do you think that it's I don't think it's as important, so I'm not going to put my career on the line for it? Go ahead, Sharon.
I think a lot of it is they're not putting it at an importance level. I mean, we've had legislators tell us that we're not going to, we're not going to push this as an important issue when there's other things on our plate that we want to get past before this, So I don't think it's really an importance issue to them. I think that as long as their alcohol is legal, they're happy most of the time. So that's the blunt truth. But yeah, I'm very blunt. I say things as it is, and that's probably a flaw of mine. But it's not important to them. I don't think they see what we see, because Indiana NORML, we speak with the general public. We speak to people who are crippled, who are suffering from epilepsy, people who are dying of cancer that's begging us to get this legalized, people who have children that have epilepsy, that these doctors are trying to put them on these pharmaceuticals that are more harmful for them than their own seizures are. I mean, so Indiana NORML sympathizes with the people who need this,
There are some other aspects as well in the way of money. First of all, Indiana has privatized prisons. The private prisons have a contract with the state of Indiana that unless there is 90% capacity, the state of Indiana owes them a bunch of money. Now, privatized prisons is just wrong by our Constitution. It's wrong by common decency. And how do you guarantee you're going to have 90% capacity of a prison? That is wrong. That is morally wrong, in my opinion. You've also got the problem of what they call civil asset forfeiture. That is where you can, and you do not even have to be arrested or the police to come in and take your property. They can just, I think that, you have this ounce of cannabis on you, so you must purchase your car or your TV or your computer with illegal money. So we're just going to take it, and it's up to you to prove that you didn't. Now that's usually not possible. Then you've got all the fines and fees associated with very low-level cannabis arrests. For example, person I know was busted for an eighth of an ounce, ended up costing them $700 in probation fees.
Wow!
You will pay for your urine test, and they just go, you owe us, and you better pay it, or you'll end up in jail. And then maybe, we have Indiana in 2018, the most recent figures available, arrested 32,000 people in Indiana on possession. That's a lot of money when you start adding it all together, from fines and fees, civil asset forfeiture, and private prisons. The pharmaceutical industry in Indiana isn't all that involved with this. In fact, we keep hearing rumors that Eli Lilly would like to see it legally again.
Really?
Eli Lilly started with Park Davis in 1903 to form a strain called Cannabis Americana, which was grown for their medicines just 20 miles east of Indianapolis at the research farm, Greenfield, Indiana. And we keep hearing these reports that Lilly still has the original data from their grow and has seeds preserved. So let's see what happens here.
Wow. That's interesting, because a lot of people assume that a lot of the pushback, for it being legalized is coming from the pharmaceutical industry. But I'm glad you brought up privatized prisons, because as someone who worked at a prison with a privatized medical staff and a privatized food service, it's mind-blowing, first of all, that legislators ever allowed this to happen in the first place, but it's mind-blowing that the people who are supposed to be representing the interests of the people of Indiana are allowing it to continue and to grow, to get bigger. Every time I turn around, it seems like there's more and more money being pushed towards this privatization effort and more legal loopholes that are attached to it. Because one of the concerns when I worked there was you go and you get terrible medical. We'll just focus on medical. We won't even talk about food service, which is a whole other can of worms. You get horrible medical treatment and you can't actually pursue getting that fixed or taken care of in the grievance process, as they call it, in the prison, where you escalate it from this person to that person. Because it's an outside company, it falls outside the purview, and then you actually have to get lawyers involved and legal fees and all that stuff. That's why these inmates are getting treated the way that they are, and it's unfortunate. I think it's very interesting that with this mandate, the 90% capacity, this tends to force the law to make sure that those prisons stay full. And you said 22,000.
22,000 possession arrests in 2018.
Right, which is just mind-blowing. 22,000, that's each of those is a case that has to go to the DA. It's a case that has to be looked at. Do we prosecute? Do we do this? Do we do that? There are fines associated with it. There are lawyers associated with it. It's like a self-oiling machine.
Yep. Can you say quota?
Right.
It's just corrupt. The whole system of cannabis prohibition is corrupt from the word go. It was based on lies in 1937. It was based on lies with the Controlled Substances Act of 1970. Then when truth came up with the Schaefer Commission report in 1972, President Nixon refused to accept it. And there were some very petty things done. There's a little paperback. Are you familiar at all with the Schaefer Commission report in 1972?
I am not.
Okay. Raymond Schaefer, who was the governor of Pennsylvania at the time, was commissioned by Richard Nixon and the newly formed DEA to issue a report on marijuana. And Schaefer studied it very thoroughly, ended up with 22 volumes about like that thick of data and information, and Schaefer recommended cannabis be legalized and removed completely from the CSA. Well, Nixon refused to do that. 1,000 paperback books were printed before Nixon stopped the presses that reported the Schaefer Commission report. Nixon ordered a recall on these books. 997 of them were returned. There's one still out. I have one of them.
Oh, nice. I would be very interested in hearing about that.
I found it for $25 at a yard sale in Lexington, Kentucky.
That's awesome. You got a piece of history there. That's amazing.
I've studied cannabis history in Indiana for quite some years. And it's, I've been an activist since 1972. A friend of mine was arrested for possession of a joint and given 20 years, and we didn't know the medical data of it, the medical benefits of cannabis at the time. It was keeping him alive. He was in prison for 6 months without cannabis and died.
Oh my God.
That angered me. That made me mad. People should never be treated that way. Doesn't matter your social status, your political party. People should not be treated like that.
So hold on, if you don't mind. First of all, he got 20 years for a single joint.
At that time, 1972, the law in Indiana was any trace amount could get you between 10, 20 years in prison.
Oh my God.
And you trace them now. Now that was eased up in 77, I believe, to what we basically have now, which anything under an ounce is a Class A misdemeanor, punishable by a year in jail and $1,000 fine, or $1,000 fine.
Yeah.
Anything over that, and it goes back up, like that.
I think.
Go ahead, Jack.
Well, that's one of the things that a lot of people don't understand what Neil was talking about, particularly people who are not pro-cannabis, are not really familiar with the issue, is that the very basis of all of this legislation to make things illegal was politically motivated. They weren't trying to solve any problem. They were trying to harass certain members of the population, particularly in Nixon's case, the blacks and the anti-war movement. Okay, but it was real easy to criminalize marijuana and go after that. They could harm the anti-war left, okay, and the counterculture. And by demonizing heroin and talking about that, they could attack the black population. John Ehrlichman admitted this in a quote many years after he was out of the administration. So the whole basis of making marijuana illegal and keeping it illegal is based on a lie and based on racist policies. That's what a lot of people don't understand. So by continuing to do that, by saying, hey, we're not going to do anything with it, the law is the law and it's illegal, they're continuing this racist policy. And just destructing, it's really hurting a lot of families. 22,000 got arrested in 2018.
That's it is unconscionable because a lot of people just, and especially as a deeply conservative person, it's in my almost in my DNA to say back the blue, right? Pro law enforcement. Yes, we love our police officers.
Yeah.
And I do, but one thing that I want to make clear is a lot of people that feel that way don't understand that there are many laws that should not be on the books in the first place. Exactly. And I think that that's where a big divide comes between the people on traditionally the left and the right that are generally considered to be, on the right, we're pro law enforcement, on the left, we're pro people or pro legalization or pro whatever. We want the same things. It's just people misunderstand the route, I guess, to get there. Because as someone, if I watched my friend, for example, get arrested for a joint and spend 20 years in jail and die because they were in there, I'd probably hate law enforcement. It's not their fault because they were doing what they were told. They were following the law as written. But this is kind of what I try to get out as a message is we cannot begin to understand the views of other people until we can associate where those views came from. Well, and I'm not saying you hate law enforcement, Neil. I'm just saying I could understand how you could in that scenario. And how we need to get to a place to where we get some of these laws off the books that are frankly violations of our rights. Until we can make that happen, we're never going to get to a place where we can agree that, yeah, this is a good thing or, yeah, this is a bad thing.
Yeah,
go ahead, Jack.
Excuse me, Neil. One of the things I think is the most insidious part of the whole war on drugs is the way that the propaganda and brainwashing has worked over the last 40 to 50 years. People, how many kids and how many adults say, oh, it's illegal, it's dangerous, it's illegal, there's nothing we can do, it's bad, it's bad. And they don't investigate. They don't say, why was this made illegal in the first place, okay? Does this make sense? And they generally, on every issue, are just taking superficial snapshots and slogans instead of deep diving into the depth of an issue and understanding what is the motivation, what is the aspect, the outcome, philosophically, does this make sense? Okay, is it effective? From my standpoint, the whole idea of prohibition is a failed policy. Alcohol prohibition failed miserably and caused tremendous social damage. So why, if you're using that process, that system of prohibition, and it's failed system, why do you continue to use that? And you expect a different result. And it's ludicrous. It's just based on lies and superstition and propaganda. That's really scary, I think.
let me, if people are interested in actually finding out how cannabis came to be illegal, let me suggest you go to a website called jackherer.com. That's JACKHERER.com. Jack Herer did a lot of serious research and is considered the father of the modern marijuana movement. Jack unearthed a whole lot of things that he has backup for. And you'll see that they saw that alcohol prohibition was ending. What is the last thing a bureaucrat wants to see? His agency's budget redlined. Okay. Harry Anslinger was a prohibition agent. He was looking for something to keep himself in a job. Now, Harry Anslinger was also the nephew of Andrew Mellon. If y'all know your history, Andrew Mellon was a financier, oil tycoon, 19 teens, 20s, and 30s, extremely rich person in spite of the Depression. And Mellon was friends with Rockefeller, who was friends with William Randolph Hearst. Hearst had a very serious hatred for Mexican people, particularly after he was stealing their or buying their land on pennies on the dollar of value, and the Mexican people stood up to Hearst through Pancho Villa. They didn't tell you what Pancho Villa did to make everybody in the Americas mad, did they? Didn't tell you about that in high school. And so hey, let's talk about this plant called, and they used a Sonoran Mexican slang word for it. And let's call hemp marijuana. It'll sound like Mexican, and we'll play on people's racist fears. And
because if I could, at that point, when cannabis was part of the American pharmacopoeia, there were dozens and dozens of medicines that contained cannabis. So if you talk about cannabis, everybody say, yeah, that's not a big deal. But when you started to use marijuana as a slang term, then you introduced a racist element, and that used once again the propaganda thing.
Well, the AMA found out about the marijuana hearings on the last day of the hearings, and they got someone there to testify against it because they had referred to it as Indian hemp or cannabis. They didn't know the word marijuana, so the AMA didn't really. They argued against making it illegal. They didn't really make it illegal in 1937. They issued a requirement for a tax on it, and it was mostly applied to industrial hemp. Therefore, you had to pay a tax. But now Indiana had a law going back to 1913 that prohibited possession of cannabis without a prescription from a doctor. But nobody paid attention to that, and it was pretty much lost to history for a long time. Cannabis was not made illegal in the United States until 1952 in the Boggs Act. Then it was codified more thoroughly at the CSA in 1970. So that's the short version of the history.
And the bad thing about the thing with the propaganda, they're talking about how bad it is, and it's Cheech and Chong, and stoners have stood around doing nothing, and ignoring a lot of the evidence that's come out in the last dozen years about all of that. And you're familiar with that, Dean. I was really impressed with how much you knew about medical marijuana and the impact it can have. All of us, Sharon and Neil and I, have all over the last several years talked to a lot of people, and I had no idea that there were people out there that were using cannabis not to get high. Okay, right. They were using it just to get out of bed in the morning. Okay, or to function normally. That blew my mind when I first heard that. Okay, we've had several veterans who say I was on 10 or 12 opioids. After started using cannabis, and now he's down to 2. He said it has given me my life back. Okay,
and a lot of people. a lot of people don't realize that, and that's
it's not
especially some of the more especially fundamental religious Christians. There's that mind. That game, I guess, for lack of a better term, the reefer madness movement of the early, the 60s and the 70s that really pushed towards fundamental Christians. If you're for marijuana, you're for the breakdown of the American family.
There we go.
And unfortunately, that has really taken hold. And there are people who, in every other aspect, really don't care one way or another what you do with your life. They're all about leave me to my guns, leave me to my God. You do your thing. But if you bring up marijuana to them, oh, that's bad. We have to vote against that. We have to stop that.
Go ahead. Well, that's what it was really puzzling to us. This is the perfect conservative issue. Okay,
it is.
What I've heard is less government. Okay, smaller government, less government personal intrusion. Let you lead your life. Let free market solutions, determine what should be done. And legalizing cannabis would do all three of those and generate jobs and generate tax revenue. So when I look at conservatives are saying that, I think it's a knee-jerk reaction, okay, because of the law enforcement that's brought up in the propaganda. And that's what we think we're trying to change. So look, it's not about stoners sitting in the basement. It's about people, your neighbors, your friends, your relatives, veterans, and Sharon mentioned children with epilepsy and MS patients. We know several MS patients. It's about helping them so they can lead a normal life. Why do we want to criminalize the use of a plant? That's absurd. It creates so many problems downstream.
Right. So, quick question, and maybe each of you can answer this. I've been asked by constituents. So, let's say that we do vote, for somebody who's going to legalize it, and it becomes just like Illinois. Now, bear in mind, I live in Northwest Indiana, which our view of Illinois is a crime-ridden, massively overtaxed Chicago, right? Yeah. That's what people think of when you think Illinois. Unfortunately, it's just the way it is. There's no getting away from that impression.
Well, if I could, and that's one of the problems we have is everybody's using that propaganda, and they don't dig down deeper in the story to find out more of the details about it. So go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're absolutely right, and that's kind of the key is, well, okay, Illinois legalized it, but we don't want to be like Illinois. Michigan legalized it. Well, we don't want to be like Michigan. Look at what they did here or there or whatever. Ohio legalized it. Well, yeah, but that's Ohio. They're way over there. Kentucky is about to legalize it. Well, yeah, but look at Kentucky. We don't want to be like them. So I guess my question is, how can I reassure my conservative constituents, the people that are going to be paramount to getting me into office, how do I assure them that passing legislation that is going to help those with Parkinson's, those with seizures, those with many, many medical issues is not going to lead to the destruction of the nuclear family and a war on our law enforcement? I know the answer. I'm just hoping that maybe that you can explain it better than I can.
Okay. Neil, you want to take that?
Okay. There is a ton of information available. There is a lot of information on the National Institute of Health's website that's commonly called PubMed that shows the raw scientific information. Indiana NORML's website, inormal.org, and our parent organization, normal.org, we both have extensive resources on there. It's a matter of looking it up. There's no one has ever died from the ingestion of cannabis. The only way that you're going to die from cannabis is if a bale of it falls on you. That is, there's no such thing as a marijuana overdose.
Right.
A marijuana overdose usually referred to as a nice long deep nap. Because it is very, very good to sleep with. If you've got sleep problems, there are specific strains that have been designed to help people sleep. And if you don't sleep well, your health is going to be affected. All told, it's a matter of, we put up all the information, we check it out, and we're very careful about what we say. That the science can change sometimes. We try to stay up with it. There's a lot of information out there, but you've got to look it up for yourself, or listen to it and be willing to believe what you're hearing. We've at Indiana NORML, we tried to build our credibility up as much as possible. And I don't recall a time. I've been with Indiana NORML for over 20 years. I can't recall a time that we've been called out on information that was bad.
Then you're doing better than most news organizations.
Well, Jack.
Go ahead. One of the things I would say when conservatives say, "Oh, we don't want to turn into Illinois or Michigan," say, "Okay, exactly what are you afraid of by legalizing marijuana? What do you think is going to happen in the months after we legalize?" Okay, tell me about your fears, because a lot of those fears, it's like, "Hey, there's a monster under my bed. There's a monster under my bed." Well, okay, no, really, let's look at it, let's investigate and find out. So I think most of their fears are unfounded, based on propaganda, based on lack of knowledge. So that's what's kind of surprising. So you kind of get people say, "Listen, it's your neighbor down the street, okay? It's your cousin that has epilepsy. It's those kind of people. Don't you want to help those people?" And the thing is funny, Neil, we've been going to events for a very long time, and there's a lot of people that come up and talk about it and say, hey, they're opposed to it. My brother, cousin, whatever story, had a horrible experience, or I was with some guy and he couldn't do his job, or whatever that is. And I said, yeah, okay. That's fine. Should we arrest people for it? Yeah. But. Okay, should we arrest people? When you finally get to the end of the line of the discussion, you say, no. Even though I'm opposed to it, we shouldn't arrest people for it. That's the central question. Why should we be arresting people, putting them in the criminal justice system for using this plan?
Right. I got a question for you, Sharon, but I want to interject real quick because I want people to understand something. There are a lot of the things that have been said regarding legalizing it has to do with the job market, and it's, well, we don't want people showing up to work, high. Here's the thing: it is still up to an individual company whether they choose to make people pass a drug screen before they hire them. Doesn't matter if it's legalized or not. And at the same time, you can't even though alcohol is legal, you can't show up to work drunk. You will get fired for that. The same thing applies to cannabis. Sharon, by all means, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I was just going to add into what we were talking about. My mind has always been blown as to what people can't understand about the fact that how safe marijuana actually is. I mean, Tylenol and ibuprofen and alcohol and pharmaceuticals, and I could go on, causes so many deaths per year versus 0 deaths that have been attached to marijuana. So my thing is, and I had asked our commissioner when we had a meeting, he has teenagers at home, and I had asked him, I said, okay, if you were told that your child was going to try a substance, okay, and you put in front of him alcohol, heroin or marijuana, what substance would you prefer if you absolutely knew that your child was going to try something? What substance do you prefer that your child try? Because they could get alcohol poisoning and die off of alcohol. One dose of heroin could overdose and die. Okay, so, the only safe option then would be what? Marijuana. I mean, there's so many ways of looking at it. Your child can go and grab a hold of Tylenol and take a few Tylenol and die, but if they get a hold of your weed, the most that's going to happen is, They might get the munchies, or they might get a little bellyache, or, get tired, but they're not going to die, So I don't understand what is wrong with people. Why is it that they have such a problem with a plant that has never killed one single person, but alcohol's okay, and Tylenol and ibuprofen, and I'm not against Tylenol, ibuprofen, and pharmaceuticals and all of that. I'm not saying that. I mean, there are times where they're needed, and whatever. But me personally, I'll tell you right now, when it comes to my pain, I can, when I wake up in the mornings, that is pure hell. I mean, because my back is really messed up from degenerative disc disease and arthritis and a back injury that I had. I got all kinds of back issues. When I wake up in the mornings, it's pure hell. But I can tell you, if I take some Tylenol or ibuprofen, it's going to take 45 minutes to an hour for me to be able to feel those start to work, where I can start to move around and start to get going. I can wake up, smoke a joint, well, not even a whole joint, just a few puffs off of it. And then within a matter of 10, 15 minutes, I'm good to go. And I'm feeling great. And I'm able to work. I'm able to, do whatever I need to do for the day. So, and I work 2 jobs. I'm chairman of one coalition here in Howard County. And then I'm on the board of directors, for Indiana NORML. So I'm a pretty busy person, and what keeps me going is cannabis. And
I think it's important for people to understand too, especially as I mentioned, the fundamentalists that believe that, it's illegal, so it has to be bad. That's I think number one. It's illegal, so it has to be bad. I back the blue, so anything illegal has to be bad. I have to support my law enforcement, brothers, sisters, cousins, uncles. I have family who's law enforcement. But I think it's time for people to start looking at why something is against the law versus just, it's against the law, so it's bad. Why? Why is it against the law? What made it against the law? And should it still be against the law? If we can start having those conversations, if we can start making that a priority, then I believe that we can do both. We can love our law enforcement brothers, sisters, cousins, uncles, understand the difficulty of their job, but make their job easier by removing things that are such as cannabis that, in my opinion, causes far more harm than good. As all 3 of you have mentioned in the past, the war on drugs, the prohibition of it, has led to more people being incarcerated, more deaths, more than anything legalizing would have.
Consider what happens when somebody gets arrested for cannabis. Okay, you're pulled over, you're taken to jail. Chances are real good you're not going to make it to work the next day. No call, no show, you're fired. A lot of times the police will, just to be mean, once you're arrested, they'll find out where you're working. Hey, we pulled your guy over and found pot on him. You really want him? I've heard many reports of that, which is completely unnecessary. Okay, let's say you got somebody that has been arrested for an ounce of pot, or half an ounce, a quarter bag. Okay. They take the pot. They're going to lock you up probably overnight and OR you the next day, unless you've got a couple of priors. You're going to go to court. You're going to have all these fines and fees. You're out of work. Okay, what happens if you're raising a family? You got a car payment and a mortgage payment. You're going to default on all those. There's one more person out on the street over a plant. What the hell is wrong with that picture?
Right. I agree. One of the things that I think is kind of important for people to understand too is there's this view, and I've encountered it too in discussing with people and even some family members, that marijuana or cannabis or whatever you want to call it, they usually call it marijuana because it's more You know, it's got that negative connotation.
Negative connotation. There you go. Yeah.
Right. Whereas with cannabis, it's something that it goes, like you said, way, way back. It was understood. It was known. But when talking to them, it's, well, use of cannabis leads to other drugs. It's the whole gateway drug. If you're going to try this, then you're going to do all of that. Now, I have had friends, family who have used cannabis in the past, and they are not drug addicts. They are not strung out on heroin, cocaine, any of the other things. And there are, of course, I'm trying to think of how to word this so I make sure people understand. Marijuana is probably the easiest thing to get in illicit substances. It's everywhere. It's regardless of legal, not legal. It's been around because it grows. It doesn't need to be made in a lab. It doesn't need to be, smuggled across the border. You can go in your backyard, your little greenhouse. You can make it. The point is, of course, people start with that. It's the easiest thing to get.
Right.
As alcohol, I've seen teens that have used alcohol well before marijuana. Does that mean alcohol is a gateway drug to cannabis? I mean, the argument can be made all across. By all means, continue.
See,
Look at all of the people that get addicted to drugs because of what the doctors put them on. They have a simple surgery and the doctor prescribes them pain medication. Once the pain medication's gone, they start going through withdrawals and they got to look for something else, and most of the time they're not going to turn to marijuana. They're going to turn to, stronger drugs that will get them the high that those narcotics got them,
And I will say this. I have seen personal experiences of people that were injured, went to the doctor, were prescribed, OxyContin, codeine, hydrocodone, Percocets, you name it. I could list them forever. You guys, I'm sure, have heard far more of them than I have. But then all of a sudden, the doctor's like, okay, you've been on it long enough.
Yeah.
And then they cut you off. There's no step down. There's no program. It's just, okay, here's a week. Now you're done, or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Some doctors, here's 3 years. All of a sudden, well, they're breathing down my neck. Sorry, I can't give you anymore.
Right.
What are the people that are experiencing this pain supposed to do? Are they supposed to just go, oh, okay, I'll be fine and go home? Or are they going to do what they have to do in order to not suffer so they can continue going to work to take care of their children and their wife and their husband or whomever? They're going to do what they have to do. They're going to look into whatever it is. And the funny thing that to me, if you get pulled over and you have a pill bottle in your car with your name on it and it's full of, let's say, Percocets, no problem because it's in a container. It's got your name on it. It's legal. Who knows how many you took before you hit the road, but that's okay. You're legal. But if you have a little bit of cannabis, all of a sudden, you're public enemy number one. You're going to kill us all.
Yeah, that's the whole idea. Is that the laws have just it's escalated to a point where it's just absurd, and it's helped so many people. I told you before, I mentioned the story, but I had no concept of what opioids did. To the body, make people like I said. Several people, I was a zombie. I couldn't think. I couldn't work. It was eating up my insides. My organs were going, and I had to have this. And then when they get on cannabis, their life gets much better. And why should we prevent those people from using that? Okay,
right.
And at the same time, if I can go back to an item we talked about just a minute ago, the law enforcement. The bad thing about cannabis is it creates an us versus them situation. If I'm driving down the street and I've got some pot with me, I'm not going to look at the cop that's going by as my buddy that's going to help me. I'm looking at somebody that's going to stop me and harass me and bring the dog. Next thing you know, even if I get out, I'm in overnight jail of 2 or 3 days. Okay?
Right. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah. That doesn't make any sense.
Now, when you're talking about medical cannabis, most of the time, medical cannabis is not cannabis you inhale. It's not smoke or vapor. A lot of times it's extracts, oil, uh, you know, oil as in edibles, something like that.
Mhm.
Cannabis is oil and water soluble. Okay. No, I'm sorry. It's oil and alcohol soluble. And in fact, the original cannabis medicines were based with alcohol, cannabis dissolved in the alcohol. Um, but it's not, a lot of people think, well, I'm going to smoke a joint and I'm going to instantly be healed. No, it doesn't work like that.
Right.
Cannabis, like any other medicine, requires, an accurate diagnosis. It requires a matching of the right strain to the right person, to the right disease, in the right dosage, in the right delivery system.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Inhaled cannabis tends to work very quickly. If you've got, you smack your thumb with a hammer, smoke a joint, it may do a lot to, at least take the edge off that pain. But if you want the pain, you better be eating a brownie or something.
Mhm.
I just had a hip replaced a year and a half ago. I rejected their OxyContin and I used oil. And, I got it. I went through some excruciating pain before I had that surgery. Um, it's ridiculous that it helps so many diseases, helps so many ailments. It's ridiculous. You have to go to a black market where you don't know for sure a lot of times what you're getting, and it may not be the strain you actually need to treat your illness.
Right.
That's why in any legalization plan we've got to have home grow for medical up to 12 plant or at least 12 plants, because you can keep a steady supply of the strain you need for plants in seed or seedling stage, for plants vegetative, for plants in bud ready to harvest. That way you keep
I'm glad you brought that up. I'm glad you brought up the medical need and home grow. And here's kind of the different strains, because what I think people don't get, at least when I've talked to them, is as far as legalizing cannabis goes, one of the things that people think of when it comes to cannabis is your local dealer down the street that might have a bag on them, and you don't know where it's coming from, you don't know what it is. If we can get, and I'm for anyone not sure yet, I am for the medical legalization of marijuana. I'm actually for all of it. I just think that there are certain steps that we need to follow to make sure that we do it right.
The process,
That's
yeah.
When we're talking about medical, especially, there are other ways, and there is so much research out there that has been done that different strains are going to have different effects. There's indica sativa and multiple other down the ballot, right? Looking down, there's this that does that and this that does that. I think it's important that if we can get medical out there and get it done, then I think we can also provide people with information so that they can learn why it's so important that medical happen. And then we can move on from there. Because if you can get medical done, it's not your guy down the street. It's this long, complicated process, but it's worth it. It's safe. It's safer than your moonshine still in your cousin's backyard. It's safer than anything you can get.
It's safer than water.
Yeah, safer than it's safer than anything in CVS. Anything that you go to pick up. I mean, absolutely. Medical reactions are very, very, very real, and they happen every single day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great way to engage conservatives, to say, listen, you need to learn more about the medical benefits, okay, and all the different things you can. I read a thing the other day that said if they went down to South America and all of a sudden discovered cannabis, and it didn't have all the propaganda it would have for the last 80 years, it considered a miracle drug, all the different things it can do. It's just astounding. And people need to open their minds a little bit and say, first of all, should we be arresting these people? Does it make any sense to arrest these people? And no, it does not. Okay.
Right.
Especially if you take that further and say, these are all different things that can benefit these people who need it. So
it's really upsetting to me. It's really upsetting to me that Eric Holcomb keeps, basically lying about it. The gateway theory, which has been soundly disproven, which had no even logic to it. And he just a month ago, he said, oh, it's a gateway drug. That's purposely lying to your people. That's ridiculous.
Well, if nothing else, and this is a real question I have is, it's one thing to say, okay, on any issue, pick an issue, okay, it doesn't matter. It's one thing to say, okay, this issue we're going to study, we're going to talk about it, and have pro and con, and learn about it, and then make a decision about how we should move forward on this issue, okay? Eric Holcomb is saying not only that he doesn't want medical marijuana, he doesn't even want to talk about it. He won't even discuss the issue, okay? He's an elected official. 73% of the Hoosiers want this change. And he says, no, I'm not even going to talk about it. Now, regardless of how you feel about it, that is just bad governing, okay? Yeah. That's not looking out for the future. Any organization has to be planning for the future. What's going to happen not only now, but the next 2 or 3 years. A plan for how that's going to, whatever's going to come down the road. And to ignore this issue, is ignoring the wishes of the public, okay, his constituents, and also not looking out for the future in terms of where the state should be going and how it can affect other people. So it's just ridiculous. He has a stamp on the whole thing.
Right. I agree with you. I think that it is absolutely crucial for us to have the conversation with all the legislators about, okay, so what, for example, what's your problem with it? And then they say it, and then you provide sound evidence for why they're incorrect. Because at least as far as I've seen so far, all of the people that are soundly against it are against it because of misconceptions. They're against it because they don't understand the reality of the situation. They don't know the science involved. They don't bother to research it. They just go, well, no, I don't want to hear anymore. Right. Well, then you're doing exactly what you say you're against, which is shutting down the conversation without at least having a dialogue about it, which I think ultimately, regardless of how you feel about the issue itself, anytime you're unwilling to listen to facts, you become more fascist than I think you're willing to admit.
That's it precisely. Could not agree with you more, Dean.
I found that a lot of people will not even pay any attention to cannabis until somebody close to them or somebody they know gets really sick and tries it and gets better. They don't do anything about it until it affects them.
Right, absolutely. So we're getting close to the hour. I think it's time to wrap it up. I actually hear my teenage son arguing with my wife, so I'm to wrap it up and go handle that. Unfortunately, before anything else, I'm a dad first. So I greatly appreciate everybody coming out and spending this hour with me. I hope that the people who have been watching have learned a lot. Once again, I'm going to put the banner up here so that people can learn. If you do want to learn more about Indiana NORML, visit inormal.org. And again, thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Dion, thank you for
having us.
Thank you, Dion.
Thanks. As always, God bless you, bless Indiana, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you very much for joining me tonight.
If you'd like to support the show, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/Dion's Daily Dose. This has been Dion's Daily Dose, hosted by Dion Bergeron. Executive producers, Sean Holgram and Michael Beebe. Copyright 2020. Dion's Daily Dose, all rights reserved.